I never thought I'd be one of those people who got taken advantage of by family. At 65, I figured I'd seen enough of life to spot trouble coming. Turns out, I was wrong. My name is Thomas, and I've lived in the same house in Portland, Oregon for 37 years. I designed it myself back when I was still working as an architect. Every corner of that place held a memory of my late wife, Helen. She passed 3 years ago, and the house was all I had left of her. That, and the workshop, out back where I spent my days building furniture for local charities. The trouble started 6 months ago, when my cousin's son, Dylan, called me out of the blue. We weren't close. I'd seen him maybe 5 times in his entire life, mostly at family weddings and funerals. But he sounded desperate on the phone, and I've always been the type who couldn't turn away from someone asking for help. Dylan had just lost his job at some tech startup in Seattle. The company went under, and he'd burned through his savings trying to keep his apartment. He needed a place to stay while he got back on his feet. Just a couple of months, he said, 3 at most. I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds before saying yes. The house had 3 bedrooms, and I was only using 1. Helen always said I had too much space for one person. It seemed like the right thing to do. Dylan showed up 2 weeks later with a U-Haul that was mostly empty. He was thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders. We shook hands in the driveway, and I showed him to the guest room upstairs. Those first few weeks were actually pleasant. Dylan was quiet, respectful. He'd wake up early, make coffee, and spend his days applying for jobs on his laptop at the kitchen table. We'd have dinner together sometimes, and he'd tell me about the positions he was interviewing for. I started to think maybe this arrangement would work out fine. Then Amber appeared. Dylan mentioned her casually one evening over the pot roast I'd made. He was seeing someone, he said. She was having a tough time with her roommate situation. Would it be okay if she stayed over occasionally? I should have said no right then. But Dylan seemed happier than he'd been since arriving, and I didn't want to be the old man who stood in the way of young love. I told him it was fine, as long as it was just occasionally. Amber moved in 3 days later. She showed up with 4 suitcases and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was younger than Dylan, maybe 26, with blonde hair and the kind of confidence that comes from always getting what she wants. She shook my hand with a grip that lasted a second too long and called me Uncle Tom before I could correct her. I'm not Uncle Tom. I'm not even really Dylan's uncle, just a distant cousin of his father's. But I let it slide. The first week, Amber was on her best behavior. She cooked dinner twice, cleaned the kitchen without being asked, and made a point of asking about my day. But I noticed small things. The way she'd rearrange my living room furniture when I was in the workshop. How she'd change the thermostat without asking. The expensive packages that started arriving at my door, addressed to her. By week 2, she'd stopped asking permission for anything. She took over the master bedroom's ensuite bathroom, moving all of Helen's old toiletries to the basement without mentioning it. When I asked about it, she shrugged and said the guest bathroom didn't have good lighting for her makeup. Dylan apologized, but he didn't do anything about it. I could see it in his eyes. He was afraid of losing her. Amber had that effect on people. She made you feel like you were lucky to have her around, and that she could leave at any moment if you didn't meet her standards. I started spending more time at the homeless shelter where I volunteered. It was easier than dealing with the tension in my own home. I'd built beds and tables for them over the years, and they'd asked me to help with a larger project, a set of bunk beds for their family wing. The work was satisfying in a way that coming home no longer was. 3 months passed, then 4. Dylan's job search wasn't going anywhere, or at least that's what he told me. Amber had mentioned starting an online business, but I never saw her working on anything except her phone. I tried to have a conversation with Dylan about timelines. When might they be moving out? Did he have any leads on jobs? He got defensive, said I was pressuring him, that Amber was stressed enough without me adding to it. That should have been my warning. But I convinced myself to be patient. Family helps family, I kept thinking. That's what Helen would have wanted. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October. I'd been at the shelter for 3 days straight, sleeping on a cot in their volunteer room while we finished the bunk bed project. It was a bigger job than I'd anticipated, and the shelter director had asked if I could stay on site to supervise the installation. I'd texted Dylan to let him know, and he'd responded with a thumbs up emoji. When I pulled into my driveway at 4 in the afternoon on Tuesday, I knew immediately something was wrong. There was a different car parked in Helen's spot, a black BMW with temporary plates. The front door's lockbox, the one I used when I traveled, was sitting open on the porch. I tried my key in the front door. It didn't work. They'd changed the locks. My heart started pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. I rang the doorbell and waited. Through the frosted glass, I could see movement. Finally, Amber opened the door, and the look on her face told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't surprised to see me. She was annoyed. She was wearing one of Helen's old cardigans, the cream-colored one I'd been looking for last month. My wife's cardigan, on this woman who'd been living in my house for 4 months. "Thomas," she said, not moving from the doorway. "We weren't expecting you back until Thursday." "This is my house," I said, keeping my voice level. "Why don't I have a key that works?" She sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "Come in. We need to talk." I stepped inside, and my breath caught. They'd rearranged everything. The furniture Helen and I had chosen together. The layout I'd designed specifically for the flow of the space. It was all different. My leather reading chair was gone. The bookshelf I'd built by hand was shoved in a corner, replaced by a massive flat-screen TV I'd never seen before. "What have you done?" I asked. Amber walked past me into the living room and sat on the new couch they'd brought in, a white leather monstrosity that looked like it cost more than my truck. Dylan was sitting in the corner, not meeting my eyes. "We've been doing some thinking," Amber said, crossing her legs. "This house is way too big for one person. It's not fair, really. There are people who need space, like me and Dylan, and you're just rattling around here by yourself." I stared at her. "This is my house. Actually," she said, reaching for a folder on the coffee table, "we've been going through some paperwork. Did you know that under Oregon law, if someone lives in a property for more than a certain period and contributes to its upkeep, they can establish residency rights?" She pulled out several printed pages. "We've been paying for groceries, utilities, maintenance. Dylan even fixed the fence last month. We have a legitimate claim to living here." "You haven't paid for anything," I said. My voice was shaking now. "I've covered everything." "Do you have proof of that?" Amber smiled. "Because we have receipts, timestamps, documentation of our contributions to this household." Dylan finally spoke up. "Tom, we're not trying to take your house. We just think it makes sense for us to stay here. You're getting older, and you might need help around the place eventually. We could take care of you." The way he said it, like he was doing me a favor, like they were being generous. "Get out," I said quietly. Amber laughed. "I don't think so. We've established residency. If you want us to leave, you'll have to evict us, and that takes months. By then, well," she shrugged, "a lot can happen in months." "You changed my locks." "For security," she said smoothly. "There have been break-ins in the neighborhood. We were worried about you, being away so much. We wanted to make sure the house was safe. We were going to give you the new key when you got back." She was lying, and she knew I knew it. But the confidence in her voice, the prepared answers, it told me this wasn't spontaneous. She'd been planning this. "Dylan," I said, looking at my cousin's son, "is this really what you want?" He wouldn't look at me, just stared at his hands and said nothing. I turned and walked out of my own house. I didn't trust myself to stay in that room with them. I got in my truck and drove to the nearest coffee shop, where I sat in my vehicle in the parking lot and tried to process what had just happened. They'd taken my house. In 4 months, they'd moved in, established some kind of fake legal claim, and decided they were staying. And Dylan, the kid I'd tried to help, was letting it happen. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, Richard Chen. I'd known Richard for 20 years. He'd handled Helen's estate after she passed, and we played chess together once a month. "Tom," he answered on the second ring, "how's the shelter project going?" "Richard," I said, "I need your help. I've got a situation." I told him everything. The timeline, Amber's claims, the changed locks, all of it. Richard listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Tom, I need to ask you something. Did you give them written permission to live there? No. It was verbal. Family helping family. Good. Did you ever accept money from them for rent or utilities? Never. I wouldn't take money from family. Even better. Do you have documentation that you own the house free and clear? Of course. Paid it off 15 years ago. Okay. Richard's voice shifted into business mode. Here's what we're going to do. Don't go back to that house tonight. Get a hotel room. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing for an immediate eviction based on unlawful holdover. Since they have no lease, no rental agreement, and no legal standing, we should be able to move quickly. How quickly? In Oregon, if I can get an emergency hearing, maybe 48 hours. But Tom, there's something else you should know. What this woman did, changing your locks without permission, that's illegal. That's constructive eviction in reverse. If she's claiming residency rights based on fraudulent documentation, that's a crime. I want them out, Richard. Whatever it takes. I'll need you to do something for me, he said. Do you have any way to document what's happened? Photos of the changed locks, recordings of conversations, anything? My mind went to the security cameras I'd installed 2 years ago after a string of package thefts in the neighborhood. I'd put them up on the outside of the house, covering the front door, back door, and driveway. But I'd also installed one inside, a small camera in the living room, hidden in the bookshelf, just to keep an eye on things when I traveled. I have cameras, I said. Inside and out, everything from the last 4 months. Richard whistled. Did they know about the cameras? The outside ones, yes. The inside one, no. Is that a problem? In Oregon, it's legal to record in your own home without consent. Tom, this is good. This is very good. Send me everything you have. If she made threats, if there's evidence of them changing locks, if they discussed their plan on camera, we have them. I drove to a hotel and checked in for the night. Then I spent 3 hours going through security footage on my laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. The outside cameras showed Amber meeting with a locksmith 2 days ago, while I was at the shelter. She'd told him she was the homeowner and had lost her keys. I could see her handing him cash, see him changing the locks while Dylan stood in the background, looking uncomfortable but not stopping it. The inside camera was worse. There were hours of footage of Amber on the phone, talking to someone about the old man and how easy it was to manipulate him. She laughed about how I'd believed the story about Dylan losing his job, how desperate he was to keep her happy that he'd go along with anything. He's sitting on all this equity, she said in one clip, sprawled on my couch. Once we establish residency, we can drag out the eviction for months. By then, we'll have enough leverage to negotiate a buyout. Old guys like him always cave eventually. They don't want the stress. There was more. She'd been stealing small items, things she thought I wouldn't notice. Helen's jewelry from the bedroom dresser, some of my tools from the workshop. The footage showed her boxing them up and putting them in her car. I sent everything to Richard. Then I sat on the hotel bed and let myself feel angry. Really, properly angry. Not just at Amber, but at myself. For being naive. For ignoring the warning signs. For letting these people into Helen's house and watching them disrespect everything she and I had built together. But beneath the anger was something else. Determination. Richard called me at 7 the next morning. I've filed the emergency petition. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at 10. I've also contacted the police about the theft and fraud. They want to talk to you. What do I need to do? Show up at the courthouse tomorrow. Bring documentation of ownership, utility bills in your name, anything that proves it's your house. And Tom, don't contact them. Don't go to the house. Let the legal system handle this. What about my things? My wife's things? We'll get them back. I promise. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I kept watching the security footage, seeing Amber and Dylan moving through my house like they owned it. At one point, Amber filmed a video on her phone, doing a tour of the rooms, talking about her new place and how she'd finally found somewhere she could settle down. The courthouse hearing was brief. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, listened to Richard's presentation, looked at the evidence, and then asked Amber's court-appointed attorney a single question. Does your client have any written agreement with Mr. Thomas establishing a landlord-tenant relationship? The attorney, clearly unprepared, stammered, "No, Your Honor, but they had an oral agreement, and my client has established residency through continuous occupation and contribution to the household." Contribution documented how? We have receipts for groceries and household items. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Thomas, did you request or require these purchases as a condition of their staying in your home?" "No, Your Honor. They were guests. I asked for nothing in return." She nodded, looked at the footage Richard had submitted, particularly the parts where Amber discussed her plans, and made her decision. "The petition for immediate eviction is granted. The respondents have 24 hours to vacate the premises and return all keys and property belonging to Mr. Thomas. Failure to comply will result in law enforcement intervention. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for possible criminal charges related to theft and fraud." Amber stood up, her face red. "This isn't fair. We have rights." "You have the right to leave Mr. Thomas's property," the judge said coldly. 24 hours. Next case. I wanted to feel victorious, but mostly I felt tired. Richard walked me out of the courthouse and put a hand on my shoulder. "Go back to your hotel. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll meet you at the house with a police escort. We'll make sure they're gone and change the locks again." That night, I got a text from Dylan. It was the first time he'd contacted me directly since the confrontation. "Tom, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. Amber said we were just securing our position, that you'd understand eventually. I didn't know about the stealing. I didn't know about most of it. I was stupid. I'm sorry." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think he'd been manipulated, and didn't realize what Amber was really doing. But another part remembered him sitting in that living room, silent, while she threatened me in my own home. I didn't respond. The next day, Richard and I met at the house at 2 o'clock. There were 2 police officers waiting in the driveway. The black BMW was gone, and when we tried the door, my old key worked. They'd changed the locks back. Inside, the house was a disaster. They'd taken the new TV, the white couch, and most of their personal belongings, but they'd also left trash everywhere, dirty dishes stacked in the sink, and crude messages written on the bathroom mirrors in lipstick. In the master bedroom, I found Helen's jewelry box empty. The photos I'd kept on the nightstand were gone. Her favorite blanket, the one I'd wrapped myself in on bad nights, was missing. They'd taken everything they could carry and destroyed what they couldn't. One of the officers, a younger guy with kind eyes, helped me document the damage for the report. "This happens more than you'd think," he said. "People take advantage of kindness. But you did the right thing, getting the law involved." "Doesn't feel right," I said, looking at the wreckage of my living room. "It will," he said. "Give it time." Over the next week, I cleaned and repaired. I hired a restoration company to fix the damaged walls. I changed all the locks again, this time to a smart system that I could monitor from my phone. I replaced the missing photos with copies from my backup drive. I couldn't replace Helen's jewelry or her blanket, but I tried to make the house feel like home again. The police investigation moved forward. They tracked down some of Helen's jewelry at a pawn shop, where Amber had sold it 3 weeks earlier. The pawn shop had security footage and records. Combined with my home security videos, it was enough for the DA to file charges for theft, fraud, and unlawful conversion. Amber was arrested 2 weeks later in California, trying to pull the same scam on an elderly widower in San Diego. Turns out, I wasn't her first victim. The police found evidence of at least 3 other similar schemes over the past 5 years. She'd move in with vulnerable men, establish residency, then either force a buyout or steal what she could before moving on. Dylan cooperated with the investigation and avoided charges. He admitted that Amber had targeted me specifically, researching our family connection and convincing him to make that initial phone call. He claimed he didn't realize the full extent of her plans until it was too late, but I didn't know if I believed him. He tried to apologize in person, showing up at my door one evening, about a month after the eviction. I let him stand on the porch while he talked, but I didn't invite him in. "I was weak," he said. "She made me feel important, like I mattered, And I was so desperate after losing my job that I convinced myself what we were doing was okay. That you had so much space, you wouldn't mind sharing. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm so sorry. You let her wear Helen's cardigan, I said quietly. You watched her take over my wife's house, and you said nothing. You think sorry fixes that? No, he said. I know it doesn't. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. I'm in therapy now. I'm trying to understand how I let it get that far. Good luck with that, I said, and closed the door. I don't know if I'll ever forgive Dylan. Some days I think maybe he was just a kid who got manipulated by someone smarter and more ruthless than he was. Other days I remember that he's 28 years old, not 18, and he made his choices. Amber took a plea deal to avoid trial. She got 3 years in prison for theft and fraud, with restitution orders for all her victims. I got back about 60% of what she stole, monetarily speaking. The sentimental value of Helen's things? That's gone forever. But here's what I learned, and what I wish I'd known 6 months ago when Dylan first called. Helping family is important. It's one of the things that makes us human, that willingness to extend a hand to someone who needs it. But there's a difference between helping and enabling. There's a difference between being kind and being a doormat. I should have set boundaries from the start. I should have asked for references, done a background check, put everything in writing. I should have said no when Amber showed up with her 4 suitcases and her manipulative smile. I should have trusted my instincts when things started feeling wrong. Most importantly, I should have remembered that protecting myself and honoring Helen's memory wasn't selfish. It was necessary. These days, I'm more careful. I still volunteer at the shelter, but I don't bring strangers home. When distant relatives call asking for help, I offer advice, maybe some financial assistance, but not my space, not my peace. The house feels like mine again. I've redecorated, putting things back the way Helen and I had them. I built a new bookshelf to replace the one they damaged. I changed the master bedroom entirely because I couldn't sleep in there knowing Amber had been in Helen's space. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been less trusting, more suspicious from the start. Would Dylan have found help somewhere else? Would Amber have moved on to another victim sooner? I don't know, and I've stopped torturing myself with those questions. What I do know is this. Kindness shouldn't come at the cost of your own security. Generosity shouldn't require you to sacrifice your peace of mind. And family, blood or otherwise, doesn't get a free pass to take advantage of you. I'm 65 years old, and I'm done being the nice old man who gets walked over. I'm done putting other people's comfort ahead of my own boundaries. I'll still help people, but I'll do it on my terms, with my eyes open. Last week, I got a letter from Dylan. He's living in Idaho now, working at a hardware store. He's asked if we can talk, maybe work toward rebuilding our relationship. The letter is sitting on my kitchen table. I haven't decided yet if I'll respond. Part of me wants to believe people can change, that he's genuinely sorry and has learned from this disaster. But another part, the part that watched security footage of him standing silent while Amber plotted against me, isn't ready to trust him again. Maybe I'll never be ready. Maybe that's okay. Helen used to say that I had too much faith in people, that I assumed everyone had good intentions until they proved otherwise. She was more cautious, more protective of our space and our peace. I wish I'd listened to her more when she was alive, but I'm listening now. To her memory, to my instincts, to the hard lessons I learned these past 6 months. And the lesson is clear. You can be kind without being a victim. You can help people without sacrificing yourself. You can forgive, but you don't have to forget. My house is mine again. My life is mine again. And I intend to keep it that way. If you're reading this, and you've ever been in a situation like mine, where someone you tried to help turned on you, know this. It's not your fault for being kind. The fault lies with the people who exploited that kindness. But you have the right to protect yourself, to set boundaries, to say no. Don't make my mistake. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't let people take advantage of your generosity. And if they do, don't be afraid to fight back. Get the law involved. Protect what's yours. Stand your ground. Because at the end of the day, your peace matters. Your home matters. Your boundaries matter. And you don't owe anyone the right to destroy those things, no matter who they are.